Шановні пані та панове, велике прохання
Dear ladies
займати
and
ваші
colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats because we are about to begin. So the time, as you know, is a little bit limited always, and I wanna, within a very short period of time, to input the maximum amount of information and to cover all the topics as maximum as possible. So that's why I kindly ask you all first to take your seats, and secondly, a huge request to switch your phones into silent mode, because the last thing we want is for you to be distracted, and so that we could concentrate on today's and to spend these couple of hours very, very efficiently. Again, thank you all for coming. We are greeting you all. My name is Andriy. I will be the one moderating this very event, and we are about to start. So how do parents, how do pupils, how do educational workers and representatives of military administrations treat and take the reforms of senior school? I think that this is a question that concerns many of us. The way how the reform will be implemented in the senior school, and what do the results of social poll tell us about the reform, about the on senior education that the KIS did. And today we will talk more detailed about the purpose of the implementation of the reform of the senior school. And based on this, we have to know basically why we do this all. Obviously, we will get acquainted with the results of the Ukrainian social poll, the reform of the profile secondary education, in order to find out what kind of challenges are there, what are the challenges we are facing, I mean, those who are implementing this reform. And we are talking about those who are implementing the reform about the senior school. Briefly, the reform anticipates that since 2027, the full secondary education will last for 12 years. The pupils of the 10th till 12th class will be studying in the lyceums, separate from the pupils from the first and ninth class, and will be able to choose the subjects as well as the courses for the advanced training. Within the reform, there will be very drastic changes in the approaches, in the basis of the organization of the training process, and in the very content of the education. So there's a huge line of establishments also are waiting for the changes, and it is very important for us to hear the views of the and opinions of the society about the challenges and the possibilities to implement the reform. Any reforms, these are have to do with changes, and any reform have some kind of resistance within the society, and it is very important for us to understand what the reason is. That is why we meet so much with the communities, we talk about this, and we are trying to hear their opinions, their fates, and their worries. Now, I would like to give the floor to, like, literally right now. Let us do it this way, in a minute. Now, I kindly ask you all to pay attention to the monitor, and this is something we will start our event with.
Може здатися, що ми ще
I
діти.
can see that we are still kids, and if only you give us a choice, we will choose TikTok, perhaps. But perhaps the art. Art is not just the kid expectation, but the beginning of the bigger path. Maybe I just don't, not I just love the biology, but I want to study the theory of evolution. Maybe I do not confuse the dominant and Pythagorean theory, but I will be able to do that with my closed eyes. So my path is lying ahead, but I can start right now. And so the experiment in reality and not in the theory. To practice my Deutsch and to discover with somebody why is it raining. I want to choose what to study in order to choose who to become in the future. So the changes are about to start. The vocational special training, the reform of the senior school. Yeah, and you can join the biological faculty, by the way. Yes, such a small video for cheering you all up, to give you the food for thought. Now I would like to give the floor to the Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine. Good afternoon. You are welcome, and kindly ask you to go to the scene, whatever suits you best. Yeah, you can take any chair you want. Right, I will take this yellow mic. Is yellow better, or maybe is the one darker? It suits better to my suit.
Ну, нормально. Тоді, в принципі, все зрозуміло.
Так, щось ще треба. By now everything is clear. So, dear friends and colleagues, good afternoon you all. I greet you all at this very event. I'm thankful to all those people and organizations who had done their contribution into the fact that we could have a very sustainable development in terms of the reform of the secondary education. And we will be talking much today much, but very briefly, I guess, since we are limited in time, talking about how the process goes on. What is the content of the reform? What kind of expectations and what kind of treatment of society is there to this reform? That is why I would like to be more equal in terms of, and you were very correct, why do we need this reform? That's exactly the question why we come into the classrooms to kids, and that's very important for us to basically provoke our youth, our young people, our adolescent people to put this question for them. Why do we need them? Why do we reform the system of the general secondary education, and especially the senior school, while calling it right now the senior specialized school? Why? Because we are transforming our society. Right now we are in a very, I would say, indicator period for our time, for our country. And what's going on right now in our country has a global meaning. And basically, that's the transition from a society of the authoritarian society in which we have been living up to the very free democratic structure of society. Concurrently, we change the structure of economy. Concurrently, the technological sets of mind are being changed. And all this requires from us the adequate environment to form a human being that will be effective, a human being that will be happy, a human being for whom it will be okay to feel in this new world we are fighting for, and we are entering in with a whole civilized world. That is why freedom is one of the basic values. That is something we are standing for and holding the fort at the very front line. And this is something our generations, previous generations have been fighting for. And now we are having a progress in it. And today, freedom should become a basic reason and need in the school. So the senior school is about that. The senior school is about the choice, freedom of choice, and about the forming of that citizen who completely correlates with the values of freedom and values of responsibility, the values of own initiative, of own subjectivity. And forming among civilians this subjectivity should start earlier. And this is already proven. Then the earlier we provide kids with freedom, the earlier we provide them the choice of instruments and tools they will be able to control, the more efficient they will become in the future, the better they will develop in the future. That is why the senior specialized school, it's about freedom, and that's about responsibility, where the main role is being played by a child, by a young man, young woman, a young civilian of Ukraine, and that very environment that has been adjusted to formulate this subjectivity. Obviously, we all are dreaming about super new modern schools. Will our country be able now, during the times of war and in that situational economical situation we are, to open up the whole network of super modern, completely newly built schools? That's not a fact, but the idea of bringing there the contextual meanings and correspondingly to transform those environments in which we are right now, in which our young people are right now, you can't do that. One can't do that without, I would say, very extreme costs. And now, the solution we are all have been working upon in the Ministry of Education, as well as our pilot practitioners are working, who are launching completely into complete piloting versions. And right now there is the pre-pilot versions of the senior secondary school and the whole line of NGOs, including Decide, to which we are very much thankful for organization of this event and the presentation of our social poll. Very much thankful to you for your activity. And those items and questions, our directors of schools, the leaders of the educational departments, the leaders of institutions of the post-diploma pedagogical education, the whole progressive community, I would say, that is actively pushing forward this reform with the support of the government, with the support of Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada and Special Committee on Educational Affairs that is so much caring about this very reform. By lobbying the idea of spending more money in front of the Ministry of Finances. And today I know that we spend much money, obviously within the context of war. There will not be a time when the money will be enough, but still we have a pretty good progress in terms of financing the reform of a new Ukrainian school. So all this community we can call the progressive community progressive educational community is working towards that the reform of senior secondary school will be successful despite all the challenges. When we were projecting it, when we were designing it, we didn't have the full-scale invasion. When we were designing it, there wasn't even in the biggest fears, all those kind of pandemics and all those kind of fears that we have right now. But despite all this, our fight for freedom doesn't anticipate a possibility to remain in that old post-Soviet mechanical industrial paradigm of the world, of the education, that Soviet era remained to us. Despite all those, even despite all those good things that it had, good pedagogical workers, good school directors, who are still there and right now still thinking about the school to change. The senior secondary education, it's about changes, it's about values, it's the ones that will formulate that final win in our fight. That is not possible without a qualitative, modern, adapted, adjusted, and capable for adaptation system. That's why we will talk about this today. I urge you to launch, to be engaged into this dialogue. We will talk about social poles, including us, adults, and children. Yes, Mr. Oxen, kindly, I would ask you to take a seat at the stage because we are soon switching to discussion. Now I would like to ask to come to the stage those for who this reform is looking at, for who it has been implemented, and for who we do it globally, because these are our future. Obviously, these are the children of our schools. So we have Matvey Zaika, the second grade students from Chernigiv, from the gymnasium number 3. So where is Matvey? Hey, just come to the stage and take whatever seat you want. We will have a dialogue, a communication, when a pupils will talk to a minister. Next one, Dmitro Doka, the gymnasium number 3 from Chernigiv, the people of the 8th grade. Hello, Dmitro. Yeah, pick whatever suit, whatever chair is better for you. A lady, Stolnets Alisa from the 11th grade. Yeah, Alisa, where are you? Yeah, happy to see you. Choose a seat. Timothy, the pupil of the 11th grade from Chernigiv. And another pupil, the pupil of the 9th class, Andriy Zhabenko, from the Lyceum number 1, from Petropavlovsky Borshagivka in Kyiv region. Hello? Yeah. Unfortunately, don't have a choice of the seat this time. So, greetings you all. Today we have a unique possibility because today you will be able to talk to a minister. A minister can ask you questions, and I would offer to start from that. And that later on you can ask the questions as a minister, the ones that concern you most. So, Mr. Oxen, I would offer to start from you, to ask a question from a minister to children, perhaps what you want to find out from them, what kind of their thoughts they have, what kind of worries or challenges they have. Yes, the question is, did somebody get you trained for this very event? Do you have any kind of pre-prepared questions? If you do, throw them away. If they are relevant, that's fine. But I want to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your questions, and the environment of the senior secondary education. It's mostly about the right for errors, not in that terms typical for us, because for us, like an error and mistake, that's something big and wrong. But my idea is that to make errors, that's a good, and making errors, that's a good thing, because without errors, you will not be able to get on the right path. That's why it's about the completely different treatment to errors. It's about completely from another context of the error. You did an error, that's good. You do the analysis and you move forward. That's why the question I would have for you is the same. Why, in your mind? I think that your schools are pretty good. You all are mostly in the 8th grade, the 8th, 9th, and 11th grades. Right, and why? What's your opinion? Are you comfortable right now? What are you lacking in school? Perhaps briefly, some of you can tell a kind of a key problem or key challenge that you have, or maybe on the contrary, what you have already is good and we shouldn't change anything. Yeah, who is ready to start? Ladies and gentlemen. But there are any kind of problems, but they're not that much big. That's why we have to develop towards putting money into education, I think.
Стосовно цієї реформи, я
Well,
вважаю,
in
що
terms of
учні
this very reform, I think that for kids, for people, will have a much bigger choice in terms of the profile. So all in all, you support the reform? Yes, I do. Okay, but in this case, you will have theoretically. So a reform hasn't started yet. Unfortunately, you know, we have been talking much with young people. My job was like this because young people was my category, targeted category. You talk to them about the future, but they are still remaining that back model and they do not generate the ideas for the future generations. So future generations after the 8th class, they will have to make up the decision. Sorry, after the 9th. After the 9th class, they will have to make up their minds and to leave their school and to go to another school. So does this scares you, this kind of realization that you will have to abandon your teammates and join new ones? Well, no, it's not scary. On the other way, I would say it kind of provokes to study because I love challenges, and this kind of challenges motivate me to go on, to move on. Well, it's a rare occasion when you find somebody who would state that he or she likes challenges. Yeah, to my mind, the 10th and 11th grades, I mean the senior school, that's, I would say, very responsible and responsible people and people who already realize themselves. So people who have to make a choice for the next phase of life, meaning the choice of the profession, meaning the field of activity in which they want to realize themselves. But this very reform, I would tell, kind of simplifies this process because by studying more the specialized subjects, it basically makes the ground of makes it easier. Mr. Oxen,
Тимофій, давайте.
yeah,
Давайте,
Timothy,
Тимофій.
why not you? So the question I have is, if a pupil made an error with the choice of his or her subject, what should he or she do? And will he be able, at the beginning of the new year, be able to choose a new subject? So briefly said, yes, he can or she can, because we have been talking about the new treatment to the word error, what the error or mistake is. That is why we cannot limit this freedom. Moreover, you know that we have two types of establishments, academic lyceums and professional college. And in professional college, you go in there, you gain a profession, and you move out from the schools after 12th grade with the possibility of a human being who already can sustain himself or his family, her family. And that's also a final choice, because after professional college, you do not lose your ability and your rights to gain the high education in the institute. If you understand that you might not be ready, haven't gained the subjects that you did at school. But me personally, I ended up the vocational training education. It's like a psychological thing you can rely on, sometimes material one. That is why, yes, this kind of freedom will remain. Yeah, let me at the 9th and the 10th class and 12th class, they change a little bit in terms of format of the specialized subjects, because the 10th class is the most wide one. It's most basic one. And after that, you still can choose a line of direction. Alisa, next question? Yeah. Well, since 2027, in the school, the pupils will have to 1 more year to be at school. Is there any reason for that? Well, precisely for that, we have modeled the reform in such a way for you to be able to come to the university more prepared. Moreover, I will tell you this. Right now, we are talking about with our directorate team from the higher education, and according to the several branches of knowledge, we anticipate the lowering down the amount of bachelor degree diplomas. We will do this announcement a little bit separately, but you enter the university in a more prepared way, and you move out and you graduate from the university if you chose a professional education. You graduate the university with already a profession. That's why plus 1 more year, and according to this wide frame in which you can navigate yourself, and then you can basically narrow it all down. And for this, there will be 2 more additional years. So just that's the reason why we have this 1 more year. Well, if I get this right, so all in all, it's not the 12th class, that we add, it's more about the adding the 10th class so that young people could have a much broader look into the future. So next question from Dmitro. Yeah, why do we need to change the school after 9th class? What kind of benefits does it have?
Так. Да, власне, для того, щоб прийняти
Well,
рішення і
the reason is for you to be able to make up your mind and change the environment. So, there are too many kids right now who go into senior school, according to the inertia. Just because they don't want to make up their minds and take a decision. If you want to take a decision, you go to academical lyceums or professional college. And this is exactly that kind of line that you cross into a new quality of yourself. That is why simply to remain in school and to move on with your study, kind of on inertia, it's not possible. You will have to make a realized solution and decision. It means that together with your parents, you will be studying your interests, you will be studying your talents, capabilities, and will make up a decision whether you go to Lyceum or to another school. The same about environment. The environment of the senior school has been formed differently. It has completely different infrastructure. It has completely different labs, completely different workshops, and the conditions for studying. One cannot formulate them, and it's not even relevant to formulate them in the basic school. That is why we basically switch into a new quality. That's why it is very important. Thank you. So, what should we know about the changes that lie ahead of us in the senior school? Well, I guess that at least you have to navigate in what kind of changes you will be facing. You will have to understand that you will have more responsibilities. With time, it will grow gradually. You will be able to choose a profile and specialization. You will be formulating the modules according to which you will be studying. You will be not even formulating them. You will be choosing them. And this is something that will teach you to be a subjective human being, meaning that you will be the one influencing the environment in which you will be studying, what kind of components of the educational program you choose. It also prepares you to that university that we are forming these days as a ministry while implementing our reforms. Today, the Ministry of Education prepared a law draft about the subjectivity of a student who allows to impact the way how you form your trajectory in the university. And to this, you also get ready in the academic lyceum.
Добре, так, щоб були можливість задати питання усім. Андрій.
Okay, so such an opportunity to go with questions. Andriy, your question. Well, as for we were talking, I had another question, if I may. So, Mr. Iksan, and after 2027, would you like to go to the same school as now goes through the reform? Well, you know, unfortunately, that's the way it happens, that every generation is preparing the conditions and the environment for the next generation and really strives for the best. Of course I would, of course. I really lack the freedom in the school that I myself personally as a person I always strived for, and that school that I went to, and I went to Soviet school, and there were a few not bad teachers really that were really treating kids good, and they were inspiring, and just one word, sometimes one sentence can inspire you for the whole life, and you can really be left remembering it for the rest of your life. But this was not enough. But the model was authoritarian, and it was in such paradigm. You know, there's a right answer and the wrong answer, and you have to say the right answer. You don't have the right for a hypothesis or for thought. You don't have the right to error, because this is automatic basing on those mistakes. That's how you form your understanding of yourself, your idea of yourself. So any normal person, so to say, whoever went to Soviet school, of course, they would want to go to school with more freedom. And I hope that in the future, as we do it now, we will be lucky to have that. And you said you have two questions, right? And second one is, does this reform foresees more practice? Yes, of course, undoubtedly. This is the point of it, you see? And today, within the context of a specialized education of high school, and even the base one we try to integrate. So we try to change the approach on how you work in laboratories, how you work in workshops, and it's very important that those tools that we have within the context of New Ukrainian School and everything, the equipment that is being purchased for the schools, it's important that our students, our youth has access to it, so they can gain knowledge through their own experiments, through their own argumented research. It's very important to have all of those tools in your hands. So as much practice as we can get, that's what goes within the concept. That's what's embedded within the concept. Okay, maybe there's another question. Yes. So whether there's a material base for certain educational tracks that is already created, not yet, but it's undergoing process, and it's a concept that is being developed. There are some recommendations as for the equipment. For example, when we get to sciences, and we also work on technology, such subjects, but it's more about base school, but it's also about senior specialized school. So of course the environment has to be different. And this is a huge work before the Ministry of Education, along with its partners, that is awaiting, and it's a huge package of documents, all the typical standards and everything, to ensure all of those new educational programs that we embed within senior specialized schools. So yes, school has to be physically different, and time for that is of course not enough, not a lot, and we need a lot of money for that, but I hope we will make it by 2027. Thank you. That's it. I'm not letting you go just yet. We also have time for 1-2 more questions from our guests, from the audience. If anyone has any schools, please go ahead. And if you're interested, you can also address the question to the kids. Okay, we have 2 hands. Okay, let's just record that. So I saw you, 2 questions, please, but be brief. And who are you? Yulia Machovich, Kyiv TV channel. So this is the question about implementing or specialized education in rural areas, in village schools, and we also read that there's going to be some main point educational institutions. So overall, what is the response of the special? So we want to preserve the primary school in villages, and it's going to stay there, even if it's not too big. If we still want to preserve it, because kids of this age, they need to be closer to their parents. Their commute should be as short as possible. The basic school, this is a network that requires a little bit different approach, and here those institutions, the ones that you're talking about, it's a very important element. We need to make sure that we have bigger schools where there's better conditions, better network. But when we talk about senior specialized school, when we talk about academic lyceums or colleges, vocational colleges, this is already a network that is somewhat formed, depends on the region. The quality of the network is different. Someone, of course, took it very responsibly. Some regions, they really built a very quality network. We understand that it's going to be 600 students and more. This is the minimum that we should have, but within the conditions of our demography, this is very little amount of schools. This is direct challenges for us, because we understand that the commute should not be more than 30 minutes. We're not looking at kilometers, we're looking at the time. Sometimes it could be 15 kilometers per hour, unfortunately. And we understand that the big regions that don't have very much population, for example, Chernihiv, Odessa region, that it's going to be not a lot of those lyceums, and we will have to find some solutions. But the reform suggests those solutions, and we will try to see how we can make some exclusions, how to use it, in which cases to use this differentiated approach, because on the one hand, we should not lose the focus, we should not lose the point, because on one side it's a lot of different educational tracks, and of course, as I said, we need to have at least 600 or preferably 1,200 and more pupils, but also so it's 1 per 5 communities, and also so the kids don't have too long of a commute. And this is also about the infrastructure. We select one institution that is reconstructed, that is as close as possible to the idea that we have within this reform, when we talk about physical environment, that we can reconstruct, we can purchase more equipment, and this could be social space, this is social infrastructure, it could be labs, workshops, and everything that has to be there. It has to be placed in that school. And also a comfortable commute for the children. So the comfortable lines of transformation, buses, of course. This is something that the government works on every year. And just recently, they allocated more budget to purchase school buses. And I hope that by 2027, we will have completed the needed amount, and I am sure that we will have 100% of coverage in our communities. And this is about roads. This is not necessarily directly connected to education, but roads are very important. And I personally went to different regions, and I saw that, you know, when you take a car, you're getting exhausted. What to say about buses? And if you get to travel 40 minutes per day, and at some point, by the time you get to the school, you're already nauseous. And this is very important element as well. It's road infrastructure. So today, communities, they take it differently, of course. Some understand the essence, because this is about human capital. This is about the quality of this capital and the risk that we have today. This is the loss of human capital, depopulation and migration and losses from the war, and everything, it's loss in quality, but we should not lose the quality. And even those families that are left there, they need to be sure that their kids are going to be developing in a comprehensive way. So territorial communities, most of them, they take it very responsibly. They understand what that means and how it's going to affect their environment and how it's going to form the youth in their region and their community. So on the other hand, unfortunately, we have such things when there's small communities, let's say 80 lyceums just recently. Sergei Kolyboshin, MP that works with the Committee on Education, he mentioned this example from Odessa region, from his region, where it was taken a little bit differently, so to say. So we're working with communities, and the site is very much involved in this, and our experts, they also go around, they bring awareness, and we hope we will reach this. But now we're talking about when kids get transportation. But when we talk about some boarding school, when kids can live somewhere there as well, is there anything about this? Yes, this is about senior school. There could be some hotels maybe on the base of the institution. And this is all right for this age group. And I remember as well, when I was 15, I went to that boarding school and I stayed there. It's the best time of my life. It's friendship, it's community, it's building your identity, building your personality from the psychological point of view. This is the time when teens should leave their family. You know, 15 years old, this is this optimal time when some natural conflict arises with the family. And this is a normal path of development when you start looking for your personality. And living in a dorm like that during this age, it's quite interesting, a new challenge for a person where you get mature very fast. Thank you. Offline hall. So what we're talking about today, by the time it will have been fully implemented 2027 in Ukraine, let's say there's going to be war, there's going to be military action still happening, because as far as I understand, the whole essence of this reform that kids should go to laboratories, to workshops, and they be hands-on, and it's a lot of attention to practical activity, but this value will be devaluated if people need to spend time in shelter most of the time. Yes, this is true, and this is about adapting of pedagogues and the managers of institutions. But we understand that not everything, not every lab can be put on the shelter, of course. We do have contingency plans, but as of today, we're sticking to plan A. We're working on the content, on allocation of funds, and in particular, just recently with the World Bank, we had a respective agreement signed as for ensuring retroactive financing of our budget, everything that is being allocated for New Ukrainian School, as well as preparation of senior specialized school, all of that is going to be insured and compensated by the World Bank. So we're trying to get as many guarantees as possible from the financial point of view and financial risks, because we understand that during the martial law, we cannot afford everything that we could have afforded if there was no war. But at the same time, we're striving, we're following the plan that we have within the concept of the reform of new Ukrainian school. But we understand that there is such risk, and we will be adapting accordingly. And shelters in each school, and now the shelters we're buying, the military regional administration and communities that they prepare in schools. This is very different shelters now, and I think that soon, maybe in few months, you will be presented with underground schools that will have workshops and laboratories and canteens and areas for leisure, for socializing and physical activity in such construction, concrete construction. I've already seen that, and that will really allow us to provide to our children, provide them with good quality education, especially when we're talking about full-time education. But we need to make it safe, and we need to provide everything in that safe environment, everything they need. And I'm going to say one more thing. It's very important how their soft skills are being developed as well. Our kids, especially when they're teens and senior, specialized school is going to be oriented on this very much. And I will say that it's good. We see some positive feedback that despite of the big losses and psycho-emotional development, our kids, they compensated very fast as soon as they get in a relevant environment. So preventing those educational losses and losses in psychological, emotional development. This is going into online. That means we need to go to safe conditions, and of course, this is a lot of money. Sometimes that budget would have gone to building a new school, but now we have this reality, and we need to make sure that this happens by 2027 in case of that continues. Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have more questions, more time for more questions. Just as I said, just 2 questions we could have allowed, but I understand everything. I unfortunately need to go to Prime Minister for a meeting on education. I'm going to leave my colleagues with you. Yes, but friends, please don't go anywhere. We still have a lot of information waiting. Okay, so let's make a picture. As far as I see, you want to have a... Yeah, okay, great. And also, please, students, don't go away. We want to give you a little gift.
Супер, дякуємо. А ми хочемо вручити нашим
great.
учням
And we want to give you power banks to the pupils. This is a need, this is a must, especially now within these conditions when you never know when you have the electricity cut off and for how long that's gonna be, and that will help you to keep your gadgets charged. when you need it for education. That's first thing. Internet games is second thing. But thank you for coming. Thank you for joining. I hope that this visit also will be inspiring you in many aspects for changes, for transformation, because evolution and development, this is only change. So, dear friends, we have a lot of information before us. It's going to be panel discussion, and we're going to be looking at presentation of research. And this is very important because it shows the real state of things that we have as of now, and how can we prepare ourselves for the future in order to research the challenges on the path to transformation of the education. There was a social research done that was done by Kiev International Institute of Sociology in April, May this year, and it was done with the support of Swiss Ukrainian project Decide and Ministry of Education and Science, and there was more than 80,000 respondents that took part in this research. It was parents, pupils, specialists from education. Was very, very big scope in order to really get the essence of what's happening. And because the reform is going to be directly about teens, about adolescents, and their responses are very important to see how the reform is going to impact the education and the quality and how it can really bring some how we can make some outcomes to make it better. Now, I want to invite Mr. Anton Hrushevsky. He's the Executive Director of Kiev International Institute of Sociology, and he's going to be presenting the results to us. Hello. So microphone goes to you, and the clicker for your presentation. So after the end of the presentation, we will have some time for Q&A. Of course, it's going to be limited, but I think 2-3 we could allow ourselves to have. It's going to depend on the speed of the presentation, of course. Hello. Hello. Well, it's going to be hard to do it brief because it's a very complex and a very comprehensive research, but you can see on the slide some short information very briefly. Yes, it was a lot of respondents, and it was but it's not only about the number of respondents, but it's about the approach, that it was very systemic and serious. And we decided not to ask only parents, because most of the times it's about what parents want for their kids. We didn't ask the teachers as well, because it's a different thing. We really asked everyone, and we wanted to see how everyone sees this, how kids see that, how parents see this. And so we can really take it into consideration in this reform. You know, it's some motto from politics. We want to hear everyone, and we want to make really correct lessons learned from this. So whoever is interested, you can look into this a little bit more, and I want to emphasize that the report itself has much more information, but now we're going to concentrate on a few interesting things. So we broke it down to a few sections, this presentation. Of course, the first one is about communication. So the first question is how the reform is communicated, whether people know about this, whether it's being discussed. Let's start from the very beginning. A very simple question, whether it's being discussed in communities. And we see that 3/4 of heads of communities and MPs and most of the managers of schools and in education, they say that this is actively communicated and this is actively discussed in communities. But from the other point of view, let's also look at this, that 1/4 of heads of territorial communities, they are still not discussing, and they understand that the time is going and it has to be more active.
Yeah, that's the technical issues the minister told recently. So, yeah, when it comes to the specialized school, we will be solving the technical issues. Yeah, let us give us a second or two. Yeah, what we see that the heads of the communities and deputies state that some kind of dialogues are being there, but okay, other dialogues and other arguments, because you know, each of us, if you have many schools, it will turn out very fruitful discussions. And turns out that very often the representatives of schools and local authorities don't have the arguments. In fact, there are worrying parents and the kids. So what should they give them? What should they answer them? And we ask them, do you have any kind of factoids to lead a very factual conversation? And indeed, 66% of the heads of the communities and 51% of the heads of the departments, educational departments, and 71% of school directors have enough factoids to lead the discussion. So the numbers are pleasing, but that's not the majority, the complete majority. It means that perhaps these people overestimate their ability to lead the discussion. And the reforms that we'll need now, the last thing we want is for them to be synced into the thousands of complaints of parents. But indeed, we want them as the ministers, as a representatives. There's much more concerns, much more worries, because these are closer to people, and you have much more need to have this kind of image in your head, what kind of questions you can be thrown. And we see the same picture. On one side, indeed, there is a progress. We can see that 60% of both leaders of the educational department and directors who are ready to lead the dialogue and have the arguments and factoids with parents. And we have 40% who couldn't clearly answer yes to this question. And obviously, they still have much less questions to which we have to provide them with an answers for them to be able to correctly deliver this to people. So it's not like a forward email, but we wanted this to be a very constructive discussion. And that was this kind of question. Do they even know that since 2027, we will have a senior specialized school? And here we resort to parents and to pupils. And here we see that a little bit more than half know about that. But a little bit of that means that another half of parents, pupils, and the parents of the pupils from the 5th and 6th class, they don't know that since 2027, what is the senior secondary school. If we talk about the pupils of the 10th and 11th classes, most likely that's about their experience. But in terms of the pupils of the 5th and 2nd classes, that's about their future. They have to know it already. The last thing we want is for them to have any kind of surprises in a couple of years. So we have talked a little bit about communication. What about the content of education in the senior secondary school? So the treatment is a possibility to select the subjects. And that's a good result, by the way. We saw that it finds a very good response from all the categories of population. Among the leaders of the educational department, 76%. Among directors, 71%. Among teachers, 65%. And they support not only the selection of the subject, but also they think that it is possible to. There are some percent of people who support this idea, but think that it is not possible to implement them. And what is bad is that there is 29% among them. Perhaps they are closer to their pupils and they have the biggest amount of concerns. That's why, again, when we talk about the choice of subject, we have to understand what scares teachers and what we can do in this regards. But when we take a look at the pupils first hand and look at the students, among of them, 90% would like to have the free choice of subjects. That's indeed what the pupils want to. And we have to put as much effort as possible to make it possible. So do our responders agree for them to have this profile studies in the future? But we have already talked about this, but we use a more speeded up terminology. And we can see that among parents and the students, around 80% support the senior specialized school. Even the pupils from 5th and second classes, for who that's the perspective in a couple of more hidden years, already support these ideas. Again, there is this request. The publicity is, I would say, open. So, and we should not lose this kind of first enthusiasm, and we should work with it. But there are much more complicated technical questions. Can the academic Lyceum identify the list of the profiles and the subjects? So, and we see that the minority of the leaders of the educational departments and directors and teachers think that this should be done centralized way. Because people and leaders stand on the ground that this should be, we talked much about freedom. If only freedom would exist. Yes, there is lots of talks about agreed upon everything with the Department of Education, but people want to stand aside from the centralized appointment. A minister told about authoritarian education, and it also reflects on this on the next slide. There is this kind of request for democracy, for freedom, and to formulating the policies on local level. Because if we ask by what means you think the profile of the academic lyceum should be selected, both for directors and the educational department leaders, it should be done for the parents and for the pupils. It's not about us asking them what kind of studies you want to have. It's about us hearing what they want. But indeed, for the educational department leaders, we have to take into account the personnel that they have and the solutions that they do on the territory of the community. The directors of the school, they talk about this a little bit less, but still there is this kind of understanding that in the first place, we put our parents and children, but we don't forget that they are in some kind of vacuum. That's why we have to take into account local, regional contexts they are in. The treatment to the career advisor. But before that, the minister was talking to children. And very often one can see to children some kind of uncertainty about what am I gonna be doing in the future? Will I be able to change it? Also, we'll talk about this a little bit from the point of view of children, but we also asked them, do they need a career advisor? More than 20% of them told that we don't need it at all. It obviously means that 80% and more would tell that this position is needed. But unfortunately, only the minority, not more than 1/4, says that these kind of things are not needed. So the majority of them is something voluntarily. And indeed, we see here this kind of problem with perception, because many kids do not know who they want to be in the future, what kind of profession they want to have. And also, please take a look at the teachers, the pupils of the 10th and 11th classes, that among them, only 38% think that these positions should be necessary. For the majority, it can be some kind of complementary position. The same goes with the course of the development, self-development, and the world education. So mostly they think that this kind of should be something voluntarily, but when it comes to finances, to the financial resources and the material sustainment, the majority of them would say that this is not timely, in a timely manner. But we get it, that the time's up and the kids are losing this possibility to start this now. Next one is the personal treatment of the reform in the senior school and the ability to maintain its implementation within the community. Good results on the level of our leaders, of good people, among whom more than 80% positively take the reforms. Obviously, in this kind of schools and for public presentation, we join these options like positive, more positive. So intentionally, in this case, we show them separately, because indeed the 80% of them would say that they treat positively the reform of the specialized school, but among them completely positively. So 44, 43, and 42 is more positively. And we have to understand that there is this positive perception, but mostly it's a very cautious one. At the same time, we see the lack of information, we see the lack of understanding what kind of future can look like. And this makes these pupils to be careful about their estimation. That's why we have to take this into account, because there are these kind of very slippery moments. And
Треба розуміти, що
we have
тренд є
to
досить
understand that there is this big trend, and not a bad one, from the point of view of public moods, but there are some kind of pitfalls one have to take in mind. But also this question, like whether we support it, but do you understand the ideas of the senior secondary education? Among parents, directors, the majority of them would say yes, but out of them, only 40% completely understand it. By the way, among the directors, under 41% of them tell that the ideas of the senior secondary school is completely understandable for them. So we can say that it's a very, very big percentage, but it's not that big enough for this kind of position of people. And to the question of whether they share the ideas of the reform, we can see that 80 to 90% of the directors of the schools some kind of share this idea. So it means that they are open. Among them, 40% of them completely are open and support this. It means that there is some kind of space for communication and for movement of the ideas forward. It's not that just another period in life that you have go through reform, but that's the understanding of that indeed something that we need here and now. The treatment of parents to the 12-year school, as well as the same treatment among people. That's a question about, for us, having more vivid discussions. And people did put this question, like there is a question put, why do we need this? But we can see differences here. Among the parents themselves, on the 1/3 positively take the 12 years school. And more than half of them do not share this idea, and they are not looking favorable to the idea of having 12-year school. When we ask the same question to pupils, among them, indeed, only 1/4 positively take it, but for the half, this question is neutral, so they're not that much categorically against it as parents. And here we see that pupils are more open to that, and that's exactly that very channel through which we can impact the parents. And to the mind of the educational department leaders, directors, and teachers, how they think it will all changes as the reform of the senior school. That's a very important one, because we have this kind of integral expectation from reform. So it's not some kind of bureaucratic progress about like, hey, write down 1,000 of letters and 20 conferences. So as a result, there should be the improvement of the quality of education. And we see that indeed the majority of the leaders of the education department and the leaders and directors and teachers think that it will definitely speed up and or 80 to from 80 to 90% expect for improvement. But only 1/4 to 1/3 amount of leaders of directors expect for the big changes. So on one side, we can see that they all take the reform positively. On the other side, the majority, the big part of this are looking for expectations good for the future, because they can think that one can think, why do we need this kind of big efforts if just a little bit amount of things will change? So it means that this 58% of teachers we have to switch into another category for them really to understand that that's not some small thing, that that's a very fundamental change. What? How do they see the senior profile school? There was a question about, yes, indeed, there should be a separated in institution or based on another institution. So there is no consensus in this regard. There are different categories of responders who support different changes. The majority of the education department leaders would say that these should be different approaches and there should be just one. 58 would say that about the separated educational establishment. 15 would say about the separated from the initial school, primary school. So again, there are different points of view, and the ministry has emphasized about that, and obviously there will be exceptions in different locations. Next part is devoted to the topic of functionality and the access to the what we call academic lyceum. We will take a look at how both teachers and parents treat this. So the first one is the ability, the readiness of the heads of the local deputies and territorial community leaders to create these academical lyceums in their community. Because it's clear in Kyiv, in regional centers, this question is not that much big. At the same time, for them, this question is very sharp. On the other side, both 80% of heads of the communities, they claim that they are ready to create these academic lyceums. Among of them, only half of them are completely assured in this. More than half of them are very cautious about that. But all in all, there is this readiness. At the same time, more than half are ready to cooperate with the neighboring communities, but on their conditions. It means that only on the territory of a community. And to cooperate within a next community, they will say, and this kind of opinion is there, and we have to find it. What do we plan to do if a community is not forced to have the academic lyceum? The majority of them do not have the B plan, and we hope that the lyceum will still exist, and that's something that will urge some kind of frustration. I'm talking hypothetically, but if you all lower down to the level of small villages where the where schools are reduced because of the absence of kids or the absence of shelters, it's a big stress for the people and population in there, and there is this kind of misunderstanding. That is why this passive position, when a change comes from the top, can urge some kind of frustration or the wave of some kind of problems, and we have to think beforehand for that. Right now, it's not that they are kind of navigating to look for the B plan. At the same time, what we offer is to our partners in ministry and all the leaders of the educational departments and directors to lower down to the status of academic lyceum. Among them, half of the polled directors are ready for that, but out of them, only 14 of them are completely ready for that. On the other side, they are not completely ready for that, but having done this poll, we understood that the majority of the school,
При цьому більшість дійсно готові стати академічними.
The majority of them are really ready to become the status of academic lyceum. But there is a question about, does the school meet the criteria? How can one do that? And that's indeed the question to the first dialogue. Other teachers are ready to work in another community if they will not have the academic lyceum. That's a question about mobility, and we can see that among the teachers, on the 9% are completely ready to work in the other community. 31% are more ready to do this, and we are talking about 70% of the teachers who now are not ready to work in another community in case of the creation of academic lyceum. And that's indeed, from all the results, that's the most concerning moments we have to address, because these pedagogical teams, this is the backbone. We cannot simply fire and hire new ones. So in this 12%, there was a question, additional one. Are there any kind of conditions under which you will be ready to work? And we see that there will be guarantees provided about the decent labor conditions and the guarantees about adequate movement and the transfer. So all in all, the teachers will be able to accept the idea of working in the neighboring communities. So again, the idea itself they might not like it, I mean teachers, but indeed, if the transportation will be provided and the decent amount of decent conditions of work, they are ready for this. Would parents and pupils agree to study in the more remote schools, but with the better conditions? And we ask this to all the parents and to all the parents of the 10th and 11th classes, as well as the students in the vocational training establishments. So there is a positive tendency that they say that they are ready to move to another location, to another community, and to study there. There is some kind of concerns about the 5th and 2nd graders, because this reform will touch them mostly, because among them, a little bit less than 50% are looking favorable to this. There are some kind of cautions about that, but among them, there is not so many categorical resistance. So all in all, here we will have a big question of a dialogue, especially these parents whose kids are still growing up, for them not to have this kind of unexpected stress from out of the blue. And it's a question to all the levels: ministry, local authorities, directors, and schools, and teachers, for them to know about that and to get the children ready. But the most important conclusion is that kids are more open to mobility than their teachers. And here we have another question: under what conditions and circumstances would you agree to work and to go to study to the remote school? And mostly people talk here about the organized transfer and the short distance. That's, I would say, geographical criteria. The kids of the 10th, 11th grades also talk about this, but also they emphasize about the preservation of the teams and classes. So the idea of jumping into the new environment, for many of them, it's a stress, and they would like to stick to their old teams. And there is this moment, if only we manage to preserve the same teams, it will be much easier for them to go to another school. And for the students of the vocational trainings, vocational educational establishments, mostly that has to do with the dormitories, because in this case, it will be easier for them to live and study not in their native town. So who will be the one ensuring the transfer of students to the Lyceum? But the local authorities have to ensure that from the state budget. Both the heads and the leaders of the educational department state that the founders of the neighboring community should be the one responsible for that and provided fund for transportation of kids to school. That's a very complicated question. There is no consensus, but funds is indeed something that will urge some kind of conflict, because there is no understanding who should pay for this. And obviously, we have to say that many kids from locally feel that this is something that will be put on their shoulders. It's not about like they will tell that the school is closed, but also we will be forced to pay for the transportation of our kids. So it's not a win-win. It's completely lost from our side. So will the community be able to ensure the transportation of kids to the establishment? So they are estimating their possibilities very low. Only 17% of the heads of the communities are ready that they will be able to ensure that. There is this kind of feeling that they kind of underestimate all this, but indeed, they stand on the ground that this will create problems while implementation of the reforms in terms of transportation of kids to the schools. For the question, where would the parents agree for their kids to live in a dormitory? That's what ministers said. It was a successful idea. But only 17% of the parents of the 10th and 11th graders would completely be for this idea. 20% are more agree with that, but it caused some kind of concerns about the pupils of 5th and 7th classes, and they would be traumatized by the changes. And to the question, who is the one who should provide the funds, we see that the state budget and the founders or in other communities. At the same time, and we clearly get it, even if we have some kind of financial problems with but to pay with the food and catering, only 7% of the heads of the communities, they definitely know that they will be able to pay for the food provision to the pupils. And a very technical question that also depicts the absence of consensus and the need for the further communication. How should the entrance to the academical lyceums look like? So the responders could choose on the one option, and we see that among 5 options, each of the options has its own people who look after it. More than 20% tell about the external test. 20 of them stand out the ground for the entrance exams. 17 of them would say about the without limitation is if the amount of numbers is enough. 15%, like everyone who wants can enter the university. It means that there is no clear understanding in this regard, and one will have to work with it. Obviously, we also talked about different things, and one of the most favorite things about our responders is the complexions and the needs. So people in this regards would tell what are the biggest needs and what are the biggest problems. We asked the community leaders, directors, teachers about what they feel the problem is in terms of the implementation of the reform of the senior vocational school. There are some kind of different emphasis, but that's the lack of the funds. By the way, the minister told that that's another question, like whether we will have enough resources. If this kind of things are heard from a minister, it means that on the lower level there are much more concerns. It's mostly about technical issues. By the way, the heads of the communities talk the same about the conditions of living in the boarding house. There is this kind of resistance from the parents because there is kind of general understanding about, and it's the question about roads. The question itself is complex, but mostly it's turning around the resources and funds. Many of them have a very cautious support and treatment to the reform, but there is this kind of worries about how this all will be implemented. On and off, there is this question about, and by the way, to the leaders of the head of the communities, because they communicate to parents and they clearly get it that this can cause a line of problems on the level of community. So what, in the mind of the leaders of the educational departments, can be the problem? It's very mirroring question that will support the same illustrative hierarchy. The lack of funds, the protest from the bank community, and the lack of material support and security in schools. So these are the top three with the leaders who are very experienced people feel what can cause some.
І так само дотично до цього розділ про потреби стосується. І ми насправді, коли запитували, якою є потреба керівництва громади,
when we asked what are the needs from the management of the communities and principals of the school and so on, so we got this, that 84% of the heads of the communities, they also talk about material and technical equipment. Also 77, they talk about additional financing, about reconstruction, about renovation of the institution, and also, as it was mentioned by the ministry, about the roads. And we also see quite similar picture around other categories of population, but on the lower levels, such as teachers and principals, they talk about increase of their salary. But this is also a discussion that is happening on the higher level. What is missing when we talk about the heads of the communities and MPs? It's the same. It's about some material support, and here we see that more than half of heads and MPs, they talk about the need in certain instructions and conditions. And here we can talk a little bit about maybe not very clear, sincere answer, but because it's also delegation of the decisions to higher levels, but we see some requests that we can work with. Piloting of reform of senior specialist school. Yes, we talked about certain attitude, but whether they're ready to really start it in their schools, the responders. And we can say here that they show a lot of interest in this, and this is quite a good indicator, I can say, and this shows that we're going to have a lot of those that are ready for piloting. But you know, as colleagues, when they support the reform but they're not very much ready to pilot it, it creates this careful attitude, so to say, and this needs to be discussed. Another interesting question, by the way, are you ready to allocate resource? And by the way, it was really interesting how we broke down the question, because on one side you see it's 49%, it's the heads of the communities, and the MPs, they said 53%. They said yes, but if it's if we get some help in organizing and financing from the government, and only 6% are ready without or just by their own resource. So we see that yes, but only when they have support. Personal preparedness of the managers of GSEI and teachers that are ready to do the reform, the reform, and we can see the numbers on the screen. but once again, it just shows what is getting attention. And also the last one is about the reform of New Ukrainian School and the attitude of the pupils itself. And almost all the respondents and the heads and MPs and principals and students, they know something about this reform. But when we talk about the heads of the heads of LEA, they said that they don't know that much. And this, of course, concerns us because, of course, there are many details that are not clear and that could really impact the value of this reform. What information is lacking? Well, we have to say quite a lot. There's no one leader, and it could be about financial opportunities for institution. It could be some successful cases, explanations of regulatory documents and concept of reform. By the way, the parents of kids from 5th, 6th grades, they were mostly talking about the explanations because it's very beautiful words, but what do they mean? Whether they are supporting the idea of new Ukrainian schools, of course, a lot of people say that they do support, but half supports fully and half leaves still some window open for certain criticize. Whether it's relevant for the school and what parents are not happy about parents of pupils 5, 6 grades, and they like a lot of things. The school cooperates with parents, and the child receives a sufficient level of knowledge. The child likes going to school. When we ask about what they don't like, is that the children, they get overloaded with lessons and homework. Teachers are not as before. Teachers and education is not focused on practice. And also the assessment by the managers of local educational authorities and the managers of general secondary education institutions and teachers in implementation of new Ukrainian schools. So you can see the numbers, yes, and rather yes. And by the way, a lot among teachers, we have more of those that criticize the implementation, and they have some critical approach. The key reasons why the reform is not implemented according to the vision. Of course, this is inappropriate implementation of the reform 2023 and also challenges of the war, and could be some lack in methodological base. But of course, war is the leader. What is lacking in order to make it successful? Of course, you can probably see from the previous slides, material and technical base, and increase of salary for teachers and increase of salary for the workers and management of education. And meanwhile, we see 90% of teachers that recognize that the students, they lose in education due to war and pandemic. And this is important because this is explained by the format of the education, which is distance, extramural education. And that's how we get to the next slide. Whether parents believe that students of 5 and 6 grades and students that go to general secondary education institution, whether really in-person education gives better quality education, and they believe so. And the last thing is about experience in school. The first one, whether it's interesting for you to go to school, and 70-80% they say that it's interesting for them, but systematically more than half they say that they don't say that they're fully interested, and among those students of 10th 11th grade, it's a critical amount of people. It's 1/3 that shows that they're not interested, and this only points to the need of reform. Whether they are satisfied with the quality of educational process, is it enough knowledge? Of course, most will say that they are satisfied, not completely, but rather yes, but less when it gets to amount of knowledge that they get in order to get enrolled to higher educational university, and so on. And 28% of parents, when it gets to 11th grade, they report about that. What would you like to change in training for children? Of course, this is free choice of subjects, something that it would be more interested. This is very popular. And questions. We said that most people, they don't believe that career advisors should be a must. So whether the students, the pupils of 11th and 10th grade, they have decided what profession they want to master. Yes, and 31% says rather yes, but we still have 1/3 that has not decided yet, and also 31% that's rather not, but it's going to be just a guesstimation of where I want to go. This also requires work now, and we already asked them why they didn't decide to go to some vocational education institution, and most of the reasons that they already decided to go to higher education institution, or they haven't figured out the profession, and this is something that stimulates them to go on, but it's not about the prestigious status of the vocational education institution. But when asked about why students of vocational education institutions after ninth grade, they didn't continue their school studies, it was about the decision not to lose years in school, desire to get exactly this working profession, and plans of parents of children that go to school 5th, 6th grade, students for their children, further education. Yes, the child will study in school until 12th grade. Child will study in 9th grade and then learn a profession and so on. So here the perception by the parents and the pupils of professional education, vocational education, and yes, it can be really competitive with good salary, but from those who said completely yes, big part believes it's not very prestigious, and modern youth, it can be very close to certain problems with this type of education. But when we ask the question for 10th, 11th grade, whether they would choose vocational education if that allowed them to get a highly paid job, and 38% said yes. And if it was really the case, and the ones that answered no, it's not because it's about the prestigious status or something, it's just they have some plan in order to go into high education institution, and that's why they don't choose it. And the next, whether the students have any regrets about going to vocational educational institution and whether they're planning to work in their profession. You can see the numbers on the screen, but this can also show the unstableness of current times, and this is our last slide.
Дякую. Так, ну що, друзі, трішечки довше тривала презентація, як планувалось. Давайте подякуємо.
Yes, friends. So this is a little prolonged presentation if we compare to what we were planning. Just time for one question, if there is anything. Just please wait, Mr. Anton. Maybe someone wants to ask something. I just want to remind you that we have QR code that you can follow, and you can get the results, your full report, and you can get acquainted with that. Okay, yes, I see. Everything is clear. No questions. Great. No questions. Okay. Okay. Very big presentation, a lot of information that needs to be understood, digested, so to say. But this is a very essential research, and it really reflects a lot of information. The regions, the local population, teachers, representatives of local communities, and this research shows their attitude towards the reform, their concerns, and opportunities that they see in this. Let's continue. Now we're going to have a little panel discussion, let's call it this way, and we are going to talk about the results of the research. I want to invite Andrei Stashkiv, he's Deputy Minister for Education and Science of Ukraine. Please select your seat. Valentina Poltorak, she's manager of Swiss-Ukrainian Decide project. Hello, Miss Valentina. And Igor Khvorostyanyk, Director General for the Directorate for School Education of the Ministry of Education and Science in Ukraine. And Yaroslava Tresenska, she's Director of the Department of Education and Science of Kyiv Regional State Administration. Hello, everyone.
Будь ласка. Отже, друзі, ми щойно побачили
So we just saw the results.
Реформа профільної середньої освіти. У мене є запитання.
And it was
Ви можете на нього
about
відповісти. Якщо є що додати від себе, то будь ласка.
the all-Ukrainian research. So the first question is going to be to Mr. Serhiy, if I may. So, of course, for such scaled-up reform, there will be a need for some changes to the legislation, whether there are already some initiatives that, in particular, the ministry works on, and what are the key positions it foresees, and what are your personal expectations from this process? Thank you. First of all, thank you for this fundamental work that the site and partners implemented, and thank you for being invited. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. But it's important not only to talk about this, but also do something, and that's where we build the basis for that. As for the legislation, I'm going to be very formal in this. So in my head, I think of this reform of senior specialized, this matrix where there's 3 streams on horizontal and vertically. I see there's 2 and other points, what has to be done in terms of the resources. When we talk about the horizontal, it says the content, it says teachers, and this is network. And mostly we're talking about network, and vertical would be communication and resource finance. This is very simplified. And as for what has to be happening in the parliament and the committee, as for the support from their point of view, and I'm not going to talk about it very deeply because I think my colleagues are going to cover it more, but I think everyone has to work on how one becomes a teacher, how do they select this profession, how do they come to this, a new concept of pedagogical education, a new architecture of this system, and this is joint work, not only the parliaments. And as for the network, this is partly on the parliament, partly on our branch. This platform, this reform is not going to go anywhere unless we do some changes to legislation about general secondary education, unless we really regulate it in the law. And because this academic and professionalisms and the fact that the network that is being created somehow imitates that reform. But by the way, the same thing we were observing when we were listening to the report of Smart Education, I believe, Smart Osvita, about the analysis of implementing in 5th, 6th grades, where teachers, they would choose those programs that would be more similar to the ones that we had before the new Ukrainian school. This is not bad. It's just any system is conservative, especially when we talk about education. But it's about communication. What we're lacking is communication and very clear rules. And I hope that it's going to appear in the law by the end of the year. And we are going to also see the text. And we also will have to work on this a little bit more because we understand that the reform is being seen by many, not only from the point of view of optimal view of future trajectory, educational tracks of a child, and the diversity of the choice that is becoming a resident, this young person, but also talking about electoral traps. Why would my child go somewhere for half an hour if just close here someone else grew up and nothing happens, right? And yes, so the committee of the parliament is very set for this work. I really hope that as soon as possible we can carry out those changes and do amendments to the law. And unless we do that, the reform is not going to be successful. Miss Valentina, the question is to you. We just saw the results of this Ukrainian sociological research, and quite a lot of people were involved. And we understand the success of reform was going to be dependent also on how it's going to be seen in society, how it's going to be seen by the parents, by the pupils, and so on. Is there a dialogue with communities, with educators, with local community? And if yes, on what stage is it on, and how does this happen? Because as we just heard, unless it's communicated, everything is not going to be taken very well. Yes, the results of this research is very representative, and we expected similar percentage and similar results. And I will say even more than with expert group, we are assessing this research as quite positive. Of course, it's clear that we need to change the secondary education, and this has to be communicated to the society. And on the request of Ministry of Education and due to our colleagues from Switzerland, we have an opportunity to implement this in all the regions. 8 regions we have already almost covered, and there are a lot of questions, and all of them lay within the layer of material and technical base and change in salary for pedagogues and the communities. They name tens of problems that need to be solved, but there are no arguments as for whether this reform is needed or no. Everyone supports and it's more than 80%. I think that this is a very high percentage, and we all understand there's war, and the first priority is the safety of children and conditions in which the educational process takes place. But despite all the challenges for our safety, teachers, pupils, principals, they talk about changes, the need of changes, and a new look at senior school. And this is a very good news. And of course, it needs to be communicated. And on the request on demand of Ministry of Education and Science, we start a big communication campaign. And the start of that company was launched by the ministry today, and it's going to be also spread out through different channels of communication. It's going to be a lot of activities and events with expert community, educators, community, but also with parents and pupils, because first of all, it's them who have to understand and support that reform. Yes, there is such a thought in community that no, they're gonna just talk and think, but they're not gonna do anything. But the reform is going. No, in reality, we need to really communicate, and it's very big scale reform. It just needs to be communicated to the participants of the reform, to pupils, to parents. This is the base. Do I get it right? Yes, and similar social sociological researches, we will do it as regular exercise, and such reforms of specialized secondary education, they have to be accompanied by regular researches of public opinion, especially including that now this reform is being implemented during the war. Every year we need to keep in touch with the community and see what are the needs, right, and see the dynamics, right, how the processes, yes, and implement and plan the policies within the area of education on national level. And I think it's always better to base on real data and being in touch with community. Thank you. Next question is to Mr. Igor. Mr. Igor, so we saw some results, we saw the reaction, we saw the desire that kids are ready for change, they strive for this. This is more or less understanding in the community that the needs, the changes are needed, that we need to develop. But more specific question, as for all of those changes, selecting educational tracks and the opportunity for kids to choose how they're going to study, what all of that is going to give to children in the future. What are the benefits? We understand what is needed, we do it. What are the benefits in the future, and how is it going to impact the pupils in their future?
Thank you so much for this question. It seems to me that this very question is hitting precisely the bullseye of the value of the whole reform. Because, truth be told, so to say, the choice of profiles and speciality, we had it even before the reform. But this selection could also be called like a choice without a choice, since, so to say, among those specialities who hypothetically could exist, and a line of studies prove that the majority are, I would say, what's called kind of literature educational branch, Ukrainian language, foreign languages, and what was popular in brackets the judicial line of study. And we have to say here that the choice should not be formal. A pupil is, I would say, unclosed system. It's unpredictable system with who somebody has to work. That's a personality who very often and naturally is looking for himself or herself in this process. And I don't like it when one starts to basically divide them into physicists and poets, when you basically attach this sign of humanitarian, saying like, hey, you're from humanitarian sphere, or like, hey, you're from physics, you're not from this world at all. So it's not be limited only to these indicators. And by projecting the content of education in the academical lyceums, especially, and in the professional colleges too, we also were hitting these targets of trying to avoid these indicators and to provide the possibility of the research, of the search, and to give the possibility to be different. So within the state standard of the vocational training and vocational education that was approved by the Cabinet of Ministers this summer, as such a basis to formulate this content of education. We have it. We still have lots of things to be done in this regards, but without it, we cannot move forward. We have, so to say, three groups of hours. Let's call it this way because pedagogical workers use it for studying, for teaching. The first group are the hours common for all the profiles. These are those subjects or integrated courses that are necessary for everyone. Doesn't matter what kind of line of profile you chose. Ukrainian language, Ukrainian history, math, English, those ones without which we cannot move on. The second group are the hours, especially for the speciality, for the deepened and advanced study of those subjects and integrated courses that have to do with this choice. For example, with the additional hours for math, if you have any kind of mathematical line of education or specialty, or any kind of subjects or courses that depend on your course, like big data for IT, for example. And the third group are the hours of so-called free choice. There was a reason why I talk about this kind of indicators. Very often, a human being who is a physicist can be also a poet. And we have lots of these kind of examples in our state. So the physicists, when the physicists are the translators from different languages, and on the contrary. What I stand for is to provide this kind of choice of additional disciplines that don't have anything to do with your primary specialty. And this very choice, on one side, should not be according to the model that exists, say, in Finland, when each pupil has own a trajectory of movement. Due to the different kind of reasons, we cannot implement this very model. At some point, this is a controlled choice, but the choice, and the minister has emphasized it at the very beginning, that a choice that has to do with responsibility. Depending on what kind of trajectory of movement I choose, I select what I will be facing on my path, what kind of subjects, courses, disciplines, level of deepening and advancement I will have while mastering this or that profile. And finally, so all in all, that's indeed that very case when a school becomes a school of life. And I know, if I may, I will take a little bit more time, but I know a very interesting case of one of the educational establishment when kids were given this kind of freedom of choice and they completely were lost. They were not ready for the idea that they would be facing the fact like, hey, do we need really to do some kind of choice? And that's a very important point that is not on the surface, that doesn't have directly with the education, but gives this kind of life lessons to our pupils, saying that I am responsible for my future and I have to make a very comprehended choice, and I have to learn how to do this choices, and I have to learn the responsibility for these choices. At the same time, we shouldn't do any kind of drama in here. That's not something that finally make a destination in your life, because it's not a closed system. And the minister told that it doesn't matter whether I choose the professional education, I still will have choice to do the highest education. That's why that's an attempt of a balance of the freedom of choice and responsibility. And at the same time, It's the way to make this all in order of the system. And just a little bit clarification, how can this impact the competition ability in terms of the choice, the entrance to the higher educational establishment, and if you're talking about vocational training, about competition and ability on the labor market? Yeah, thanks so much for this focus, because me as a human, as a philologist, I basically forgot about the central focus of your attention. The way it seems to me is that by now we have lots of this kind of studies. So this world is so robust and fast in terms of changes. So the only thing that we can definitely state is that the world is changing constantly. And the thing is that those skills, those competencies that the modern world requires, they also change in the same dynamics. And if one talks about that we will have only classical physicists who will be only deeply specialized on some kind of aspects of science. Obviously, we can't do about that, but the future is putting lots of challenges in front of us in terms of cross-disciplinary approaches and so on. That's why we have to provide this possibility to be flexible. So to say, right now, while choosing this ability of the world to change, I accept the idea that this market will also be changing completely. If you're talking about the labor market, and it is completely possible that a huge line of systems that have to do with AI have to do. That's something that we are not yet ready to. Let us think a little bit globally. What kind of skills will I need to find my place in this world? I doubt that this will be a classical format of work I'm used to. That is why I have to have this kind of flexibility in what I choose, so that I could formulate for myself this kind of set of skills to be able to find myself on the labor market. Thank you. Thank you for this. Miss Yaroslava, a question to you. If we are talking about Kyiv region, does the Kyiv region, or is Kyiv region already ready to implement the specialized secondary education? But let me start with on the positive note. 96% of the territorial communities in Kyiv region have already approved the prospective network of lyceums. And I think that's a very big achievement. But obviously there are some details, since there are some communities that still require the revision of their decisions, and we will also be talking about that, since they not correspond to the legislation. They did not correspond to it from the demographical point of view and from the point of view of numbers of pupils of the senior school. That's why there's a situation in Kyiv region by now. However, the majority of communities understand and completely understand, and they took it very seriously. This very reform, very big in terms of scaling up, they took it with all the understanding, and I hope that it will be positive in our case. Okay, let me ask the next question, the more clarifying one. What kind of needs does Kyiv region has in order to implement this reform, to start implementing this in 2027? Because the region itself is very diverse, and there are communities who are very much close to Kyiv, and they have one set of problems that are drastically different from the needs and the challenges of another communities that are on the northern borders of our Kyiv region. That's exactly what I was leading to, because Kyiv region itself is very, I would say, authentic. There is many communities that are situated around the capital. They are overloaded, and the educational establishment, they are overloaded with children, like 2.5, 3,000 kids in one educational establishment. And obviously, these very communities, they require the construction of new educational establishments. And also there are very, I would say, remote communities that are Polisia, in Vyzhevsky district, where they are big in terms of their territory, but unfortunately they have very little amount of educational establishments, and obviously one has to make this all optimized to optimize the educational establishment so that to make it all work. Also, there is a big need in the bus transportation and school transportation and buses to make sure that the kids will be delivered into schools and so on. Okay, so the Kiev region itself is pretty interesting in terms of their problems. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now the time for the questions from you. Right now, you have a very unique possibility to address your questions regarding those topics that we have been discussing about the vocational and the secondary school reforms, or about the reform itself. Do we happen to have any questions? So I feel myself like at school right now. Let me also give a little comment about the general vision and the movement of this reform. Dear colleagues, I will be honest with you. Today I have been hearing to the results of the research, and I do not think that will be a reform written down as already finalized material. We all have to understand that the work ahead of us is a big one. And together with a team of experts to which I'm attached, there is a big amount of NGOs, state institutions, and we are writing down the strategy of this reform. I would say step-by-step plan that currently we see in our conditions to make sure that the reform itself will be successful. This plan is designed for 10 years, and it's clear that we will be coming back to the content of the senior secondary school, that we will be revisioning the network of schools in different regions. That's my expertise opinion. But it is also important to emphasize that we are moving to a better school that will indeed ensure the better quality of education for our children. And I think that is our primarily focus of attention. And right now we are building that very school that will be relevant in 10 years and will provide those competences and skills that will allow children not only to graduate the school and enter the labor market, but also to find themselves in our society. Thank you. And if we don't have any questions, perhaps we will let our guest go. Thank you for your visions and thank you for your answers to the question. So what we also have planned is another discussion panel, and I hope that it will be a little have discussion character. It means that you are supposed to have your questions. We will talk about the strategical development of education in territorial communities. We will talk about with the representatives of communities. We will be learning what kind of experience of implementation they have gained by now. That's why I'd like to give the floor to Andrei Zalisky. As I take it, we can already state that he is a mayor of Sheptytsky town, or maybe it's too early. Okay, by now, who is the mayor of Червоноград town, but in the foreseeable future, he will be the mayor of Sheptytsky. Igor Stashkevich, who is the secretary of Kramatorsk City Council, Vasil Bilagura, who is the head of the educational department of the Chernihiv City Council, and Roman Bondarenko, who is the co-founder of NGO Batьки SOS, Parent SOS. So yes, please, dear colleagues, take a seat. Again, over here, we will be mostly talking about the experiences that are already accumulated by now, since all the communities are different. All the communities have different problems. At some point, they might be similar. At some point, they might be completely different. Let us start with, I would say, Червоноград. Take into account your experience of implementation of the reform of the senior school. What kind of advices can you give to your colleagues? To colleagues from other communities, I mean. Good afternoon. It's a pity that the minister has left us, but my advice would be to support communities who want to do that. The reason why I start from this, why from the ministry, because a policy is being dictated by the ministry, and the lower ranks, they want to see not only the policies, but precise actions that can provide the support to them. When we have been hearing today about the sociological poll, what was there in the first place? Material and fund basis. Obviously, when our country was implementation the reform of decentralization, that was one of the most successful, that would provide the values and resources to communities. What did they have? They had what's called subventions for development for those who create the territorial communities. And they had a possibility to equip schools, kindergartens, and daycare establishments according to this. And this was something that pushed forward the reform. That's why, to my mind, if only we would have some kind of subventions
Що всі пригадають 20-й рік, це
All
час,
recall the
коли
year
почався
2020 is
ковід.
at the time when COVID
Оскільки
started.
закон було прийнято
And
в
since
січні
the law
місяці,
was
прийнято
and
в
since
січні
the law
місяці,
was accepted
президент
in
підписав
January
його в
and the
березні, якщо не
president signed
помиляюсь,
it
17 березня,
in
а
March,
13
on the 17th of
березня
March, if my memory serves me right,
офіційно
and on the
розпочався
13th of
карантин,
March, officially the
і
quarantine started.
не було змоги
And
комунікації. Як
there
я
was no any
комунікував з
possibility to
ним, я
communicate.
особисто
The
як
way I
голова
was
громадського
communicating, me
дослідження
personally as the
показував
head of the
громадським, чи
community.
готові голови громадських
So
спілкуватися
in
з
this
людьми.
record, in
Я
this
голова громади,
there was a question whether the heads
також
of
школи,
the communities
і на
are ready to
подвір'ї
talk to
школи
people.
з
Me as a
10
head of the
батьками
community, I was entering each school, and as inside yard of these schools, I was having a conversation with the parents and the school leaders, and there were even streams because there was some kind of limitation of the amount of people. So how can I manage to persuade some of them? Perhaps this might also be another advice for other colleagues. So back in my day, we had this program in the Ministry of Education called Capable School. And what helped us, Lubomir Manzi, who is no longer with us, but they provided us with a subvention. At the beginning, we had 1.8 million, but later on, we were given just 900,000 during us. So we bought 23 multi-touch panels, 2 computer panels, and we concentrated this all in that establishment that was supposed to become a museum. And that was my factor for the parents, saying that this reform is done not for me, not for you, but for your kids. So then don't take the future away from your kids. Because this kind of possibilities they will not have in any kind of other educational establishment. That was one of the factors everyone is so much cared about, like material and fund, material basis and funds. Secondary, when we were lowering down the status of village schools, where good 11 years courses were, we would switch them into 9-year courses. So the question of the parents would be, okay, how will the kids get to the school? We were talking with a transportation company who would deliver kids from one populated area to another one. We were talking to them about making sure that the kids will not have to pay for this, that according to the passes that Lucian would give. Later on, we repaired the roads, would buy the buses, and would make it possible. And we'll launch this in 2020. And we started this based on the gymnasium premises. Why gymnasium? Because there was a collegium of educational workers, and I offered to the directors of each educational establishment who wants out of you to make a lyceum out of your school. I see 3 the most powerful schools that are there in the town out of 10. What I offer right now to you is to do that. Nobody agreed. All of them wanted to preserve the 11 years courses because they were hoping that it will stay this way. We understood that it would not last this way. So we offered them to have a gymnasium. Why gymnasium? Because there is no primary school. In the year 2020, they were taking the 5th classes. So on the 1st of September 2024, in this very establishment, we have only 10th and 11th grades. So concurrently, we have 13 10th classes and 13 11th classes. In all there are 8 profiles. This year, and I'm very pleased by that, one class chose the physics and math profile. So you can see that to what extent this is pleasant, that physics is coming back. So the key purpose was to return this pyramid, to put it in a correct place. So the child should be in the center of the attention, and their choice should be in the center of attention. There was a moment in the 2020 when only at the beginning we had 9, then 12 kids selected the profile chemistry and biology. So the fund experts would tell that you categorically cannot open this kind of classes. They all would tell me that this is not worth it. I made a decision about no, we do that. Why? Because kids chose that. If back at that moment I would be doing Baxis, and there wouldn't be this kind of intent, we would completely nivellate the whole reform, because in this regard the kids would get disappointed as well as the parents. There's a small amount of kids, yes, but these are the kids who later on have all the potential to become those carriers of changes, and this perception might be barrier can be overcome. So don't be afraid, look for partners, look for those people who look eye to eye with you. At the first things, these are kids, because we do that mostly for them. The most people who protested, because these were teachers, because it comes down to their hours of work. to their salaries. I'm a father of 3 kids, and these kids go to school with a deepened and advanced training to English, and this school was the most resistant. But based on the example that this is done within the interest of kids, that this is done for the purpose of their future, we, we won even in the courtyards. So 2 parents filed a case into the court, and we appealed them. So that's what I'm standing for. Do not be afraid. Since today, yes, we didn't finish all the operational work in there. Yes, we still have to do the gym in there. We still have lots of challenges facing us. But the key moment here is the kids who believe that they are the reason for all this. When they write down with the document to be accepted to the Lyceum, in this document they write down 3 subjects that they need most and the subjects that they want to study most. And within the 10th grade, they can change the classes. Why? Because these are the kids who are 15 years old. The majority of them haven't made their mind yet. And this 10th grade, they still have the 10th grade when they can switch the profiles. And the result turned out to be pretty good. That's why get better act and you will win.
Thank you for the experience. So a question to Igor Stashkevich. Kramatorska community is 20 kilometers to area of military actions, but the education still continues. And I know from 2021 you started being reformed and the education in your community. What are the factors impacted you back in 2021 to start this process? And now, practically, your community is ready for the reform completely and fully. What factors back in 2021 influenced you to start this process? Well, factors that had some impact was, and if you can please speak closer to the microphone, 100-kilometer zone to the line of at front line, and at that point, and we had to show in that part of occupied Donetsk region that there's development in Ukraine. There's a city that, in fact, became the central city of the region, and that people can see that there's an opportunity to go back to Ukraine. And why 2025? I'm going to be honest, the elections of 2025 was impacting this decision. If we were doing it in 2025, I understand very young team that came into the city as leadership, and we had certain cons, so to say, in the community. That's why in May 2021, we took the decision during the session. It was hard. Not all the political forces were supporting this reform, but finally, we signed the transformation of the school network in Kramatorsk city. This is a big amalgamated territorial community, and it's more than 220,000 population, more than 70 institutions of education. Was it hard? Yes, it was hard. Who was the first ones to resist? The teachers, because they're used to this rates and really the teams, and it's not a lot of, it's aging of staff. It's not a lot of young teachers, and we need to understand if we don't start invest in those young teachers, we will end up with no one being available to teach maths and physics and chemistry and so on, because not everyone can go for humanitarian, and it also has to be developed. And that's why in 2021 the decision was made, and 2022, after the beginning of full-scale invasion, only 30 schools were able to graduate kids from 11th grade, and then we had only 8, and in 2025 we will only have 3 schools that are going to be graduating only the senior classes, senior grades. And then from those years, teachers started supporting us. Why? Because it proposed an opportunity to optimize the system in a way where even today online they can have quite good salary with all the bonuses that are foreseen by the law, even 30% for prestigious work of a teacher. And that's how they joined our side, because even the principals, they realized that they started having higher salaries. Why we decided not to decrease amount of people, but go on the rate. So in physical sense of the word, we didn't lose that many people, and it was staff that used to be staff, so to say. And when we were having shortage of principals, and in the past it was this and that, and then they would go on listing all their achievements before Brezhnev or Stalin. But of course, we understood this is not how we can build a new Ukrainian school. And then from 2025, we also started implementing understanding what, again, as it was mentioned by the previous speaker, the transportation of kids. We looked at the example of Dnipro, and they had this single student ticket, and that's how in August 2021, before the beginning of educational year, we started this single student ticket on the whole territory of the community, and the child can use any type of transport anytime, absolutely for free. We took this step. We found um, patron, and it because it's not cheap to make this happen. And but we did that, and then we went further, and we provided 50% of discount, and we got six students. So if you go to Kramatorsk educational institutions, you have this good bonus system. That's how it started working within 3 years, and now every spring we start enrolling for 10th grades, and we do a full big scale campaign in each district in Kramatorsk city, and that's how we also engage parents. We always say a pupil will select, they will choose themselves, they won't. Being 15, again, having 3 kids, they won't, unless the parents do it for themselves, what is needed for the child. And it's very hard because the child only on the 3rd year of their higher education, they start understanding what they really need in this life. Because I worked for quite a long time in the Department of Higher Education and Computer Sciences, and that's how only on 3rd year you understand that maybe you chose something wrong. So 3 years of specialized education will hopefully give an opportunity to understand better where you want to be moving towards to. But the maybe sticking to some particular educational tracks maybe not necessarily right, because it depends on different groups of kids can select differently. For example, it was philological classes, it was like German, Polish, and so on. Now there are some needs for raising up civil servants and so on. So we need to remember that a lot of enterprises, they were relocated to the Zakarpattia region. There's a big need for staff that can produce weapons and machines, and this is the problem because there's no one to teach, and that's where we need to be developing. And that's why 3 schools, and our community is ready for this reform. Whether there's going to be some claims, yes, there's going to be parents that are going to go to court because we're breaking their violating their rights somehow, because only the founder has an opportunity to found it or not to found it. If you have a free transport for your child, or the school that is going to be academic lyceum will be provided with material and technical base, this is a must, then the parents, they will not win the case. But if it's the opposite, then yeah, it's not going to be to the benefit of the community. So we need to get the team that has an opportunity to go along with the law, with the reform. Is it possible? Possible. If we look at European countries, for the last year, 7 countries we visited in regards of the reform of the education. 5 kilometers commute to school, they're taking a bike, a student takes a bike, and there's no problem, or there is a bus. if it's more than 5 kilometers. Also, another thing that is very important, takes important role, is ensure the gadgets for the children. And this is the time when Europe provides these opportunities. We need to make sure that happens and the 100% coverage by gadgets happen. Okay, so another question is to Vasil Bilogura. We know that in Chernihiv region, the changes are being implemented successfully. What is your experience in forming lyceums? How does this happen in your region, and what is the plans for the future? Hello, everyone. Hello, and thank you for an opportunity to be here, to hear about the experience from other communities. This is a very important event. And the first thing that I would like to say is the admiration of local chairman, mayor of Червоноград, that is not thinking about some non-existing things, but is taking decisions right now that is needed for now, for the future. And this is very important for any person who is on leader, who is a leader, because the decisions you make today, you only do it for the future generation. As for Chernihiv, I'm not going to talk about Chernihiv experience, but yeah, I meant the community, the local community, and it's interesting. Everyone has their unique experience. Everyone who's here, and for city of Chernihiv, it's unique as well. First thing, when we encounter the question of forming the network, how is this done? How to make it available? How to make education available? How to form senior specialized school? The first, and as in with the beginning of new Ukrainian school, of course, the administration started talking to people that are working in those institutions themselves. And we put together a list of markers that we used to identify what institutions can be turned into academic lyceums in order to provide a territorial accessibility for primary school, for basic school, because for us, we selected the types of lyceums that is going to be exclusively senior specialized school. And after the analysis, starting from the rate of birth, so demographic and indicators, and the success of alumni, and of course the staffing, material technical base, and the location, that became the base for further work and for adopting the program of transformation in Chernihiv city in educational network. And in 2021, it was decided where we've actually started implementing the activities, the educational institutions that are going to become professional academic lyceums. They stopped enrolling so much first grades, and they were focused more on 10th grade, and that provided more of a smoother transition, and also provided an opportunity for parents to have more selection, and it was not that harsh, not that revolutionary in this way. As for taking out the primary and basic school from this, and now it's a network. When the program was adopted, it was 34 schools, and as a result of full-scale invasion, 2 were completely destroyed of the schools. Now we have 31 schools, and we continue the work of forming the network of academic lyceums, and already they don't have, starting from this educational year, they don't have the primary school. They're fully covering the need for the city on enrolling the 10th grades. I can say for sure that from the 1st of September of this year, there were more 10th grades if we compare it to previous year. And it's very important as of today that we combine the work not only on forming the network of academic lyceums, and a very important element of this network is vocational lyceums. And this is important piece of work on fighting the stereotypes, this mentality that kids that go to vocational institutions, um, they're somehow there's something wrong with them, or they're not complete, or they don't have the right to go to our institution. So in fact, we are, by financing the institutions of vocational education starting from 2016, we put in quite a lot of effort. And if we look at the contingent of in the professional area of vocational education, it was approximately 35%, and now it goes up to 60. So communication of institutions within themselves, among themselves, that's very important, and meetings of representatives of vocational education institutions with future alumni of gymnasium, the 8th, 9th grade, and when they talk about the opportunities of their institution, what graduates say about the opportunities to get skills for future job. And in this case, it's very important to say thank you from on behalf of the community to Decide project. And this is the year where the implementation of the project of career advisor is taken its start. And so far it's only 4 institutions, but I'm gonna say for sure that it's very important issue, and others, they also wait until they get the same position. They're excited to do the same thing. And it's not only for pupils of 8th, 9th grade, but it's also important for 10th grade. This career advisors and academic lyceums, if we talk about 10th grade as a preparatory year for obtaining this part of education, and maybe it's there's a need to help them with understanding what they want. And it's also important to remember that graduating from a vocational education institution is not limiting, but only supporting and boosting when it gets to entering higher education institutions. Well, overall, we have a lot of work. Unfortunately, full-scale invasion had to put many plans on hold, yes, on pause, so to say, and brought a lot of problems to the whole country. But at the same time, we understand we cannot just stop. Kids are growing; they cannot wait. This is the future of the country, and this is on their shoulders. The biggest challenge will fall when it gets to restoring, the rebuilding the country. That's why we need to move. Thank you, thank you. Movement is life. Thank you. Question to Mr. Roman. Can you tell us, please, by the results of the research that you saw before, quite a lot of parents, they show careful interest, so to say, cautious interest when it gets to education of kids in more distanced, but better in this regard, institution of education. How to communicate with parents that kids can go maybe to lyceum that is maybe a little bit far away, or they stay in the dormitory, but this is better condition. How to explain this to parents that they need to let their kids go, and how this communication can ensure better perception of global reform? How can it be from your experience? Thank you for inviting me to such an interest, such an amazing team. And it's very pleasing to see that the reform is going on of new Ukrainian school. As for your question, it's quite hard to explain to parents, especially within the conditions of full-scale invasion. How can you let your kids go somewhere far away from home? But I think that here we need to communicate and show to the parents this particular institution so they can see with their own eyes what is the road, what is the transport, what are the educational opportunities from this particular institution, and reassure them that this is better, that the prospects for the child are going to be so much better, rather than them maybe going to school somewhere close and just spending hours. But here they would rather get some knowledge, some specialized skills. That's going to be an important step towards selection of their profession. And I think every mother, every father, they want the best for their child. You need to show to the parents that this is better for their child, that so they don't have any doubts. Because from this research, we can see that there's a big gap in communication. A lot of parents, they don't know, they don't understand, they don't have the knowledge about what is New Ukrainian School, what is it, where is it going, and not only the parents but also the principals of the schools are not fully aware. And I'm happy that this this project, the site, is going to be communicating, and the idea of New Ukrainian School is going to be spreading out, and the idea of vocational education, because without this communication we will be getting a lot of resistance, because school is unfortunately a system that is very responsive in a negative way to any changes. This is how it has been for years. It's the same people that teach the same subject every year, and nothing is changed in school. At least that's how it has been for many years. But the situation is the following: the community, the society is changing, parents are changing, kids are completely different. It's new kids every year. It's just so different. And when they go to this institution, educational institution that hasn't been changing for tens of years, it's very hard for the child to really adapt to it. And this is a very big role. And the communication should not just go from top to the bottom, from the ministry to the institutions. There's a need of parents and teachers. They need to be responsive to those needs. They need to change. And while this reform is ongoing, and I think that is going to get to the point where we see the first graduates, it's going to be 12th grades that will have gone through the whole New Ukrainian school system. We will see how results are much better, that it's going to be completely different kids, completely different graduates that are going to be looking at the world completely different. They will be communicating much better. They will be, so to say, they will know better what to do in the conditions of our hard times. Because New Ukrainian School is the opposite. It's not narrowing the landscape and the view, but rather expanding the horizon of your view. And I'm very pleased to hear about the changes in fields, because our parents organization, our NGO, it's called Parents SOS, we encounter a lot of negative signals, so to say, and it's very pleasing to hear that there are some good examples in communities. I think that those should be shared, spread, and everyone should know about that due to radio or TV or any other means of communication, to communicate it to people that the reform is there and it's successful. So from your experience, we heard from the representatives of different cities that parents are very not happy. Some of them, they even start legal action. But can something be done to prevent that from happening with the parents? Well, you see, the peculiarity here is parents are different, completely different. There are parents that are, so to say, they start the revolution, and as they say, you know, the revolution has the beginning but doesn't have an end. They come to the school and they fight with throughout all the grades till the end. And sometimes, you know, even me, as a representative of NGO Parents SOS, I want to tell them, stop. you have changed this big negative part that was there in the school. You have changed it. All the other small things, certain issues, don't concentrate on that. Let's find something positive. Let's move it forward. And that's why there are always going to be some parents that are not happy. You cannot really avoid that. However you communicate, unfortunately, there is this certain category of people that are always against. And it's not, you just have to accept it, so to say, that there's going to be people that are always going to be resistant to reforms, to good things, just because of their, so to say, their view, their position, that, well, they were taught by the Soviet school and it was fine, and it was good. But now kids don't go to school to study, they play there, even though it's they really get to know the world better through the game. Yes, well, I was taught this way and I'm fine. Okay, thank you. Maybe any other questions? We have the time for that.
Немає запитань. Сьогодні такий день. Я особисто дякую вам. Дякую вам за те, що ви сьогодні приїхали. Дякую вам за те, що поділилися досвідом, але, напевно, найбільша подяка за те, що ви рухаєте ці зміни.
And the biggest thanks to you is that you move these challenges, that you push them forward, and due to the fact that you understand why we all need that. Thank you. Right, let us all sum up this day and what we have been talking about. What we saw was the moods of different clusters of society, both from local authorities as well as the leaders of these educational establishments, parents, and children. It's absolutely clearly that the changes are needed, and many factors point out at this, both objective ones and those that we cannot ignore, such as war, the change of demographical situation, that all impact the future and this all impacts our children. That is why changes are needed. And to make sure that the changes should be implemented better, one has to communicate them. One has to articulate them to parents, to teachers, to children, information about why this is needed. Perhaps this kind of uncertainty is something that scares everyone most, because we don't know what this is, we don't know how to step into this. That's why this kind of things should be delivered to people. That's why within our responsibilities to deliver this to those to whom this reform have anything to do with. I mean, children and their parents. Without this, we will not be able to build a very successful country. That is why let us all put our efforts into communication, into delivering these ideas, because the reform is still going on. The reform will be continuing. Whether we want it or don't want it, but it should be like that. That is why let us all work in this one big joint efforts to make sure that these changes would be as much efficient as possible, and what's even more important, for these changes to impact our kids from the better perspective, to motivate them to choose their profiles and to live according to these profiles. Thank you all. For those who joined us online, thank you all for meeting us. It was very useful and extremely interesting. Thank you.